Hey guys, how's it going? Today, I think I want to talk a little bit about lubricants and oils for your deuce and a half. Because I see all the time people asking, what's the best oil for this? What's the best oil for that? What can I use here and there? What's acceptable and what's easy to find? Really, right now, at least a few weeks ago when I was back in the States, it's hard to find a lot of the lubes that we're used to getting or have been for decades, right? Supply chain stuff's still messed up, but if you search hard enough, you still can find what you need. Now, if you look on the data plate that should be there on your truck, on the dash, on the right side, it tells you what the military suggested as far as acceptable lubricants and amounts to put in each component on that data plate. Now, a lot of trucks are missing that data plate, so I understand that. And a lot of you guys have changed parts. Maybe you've done an engine swap or whatnot. And to be honest, we have a lot better lubricants available these days than what was available when these trucks were built and up until the service life ended. So if you look on your data plate, it'll tell you that for the engine and I don't have one in front of me, so I don't remember the temperature ranges, but if memory serves me correctly, the engine calls for SAE 30, just regular straight non-detergent 38 motor oil in a normal temperature range, and then I want to say it says SAE 40 or 50 if it's hotter, but don't quote me on that because I haven't looked at my data plate in my truck for a long time. It doesn't really apply to my engine anymore. But these days we have much better diesel engine oils available than SAE 30. Now you can go find some SAE 30 or 40 and put it in your multi-fuel, and it will be just fine. You're going to have more buildup of contaminants in the engine, gum and deposits like that over time because of that motor oil's makeup. It doesn't have detergents in it, hence non-detergent motor oil. So what most of us use, and I'm sure you watching this probably already use in your truck if you've got one already, is 1540. Now any brand of good 1540 is fine. Most of them these days lack the zinc content that is really needed for not only the cam and lifters in the engine, but also the cam and the tappet in the injection pump. Now, a lot of people forget about that. There is a cam and a tappet that runs the hydraulic head in the pump, in the injection pump. So that's another component in the subject to wear, and that is probably harder to find these days than a replacement camshaft and lifters for a multi-fuel, which is also not easy to find. So if you're going to run any off-the-shelf 1540 motor oil, I would suggest at the very least supplementing the oil with a gallon of Lucas oil additive in place of one of the gallons of oil. It's 5.5 gallon capacity in the multi-fuel engine. So what I used to do with mine and what I do with customers is I will run 4.5 gallons of generally what I choose is a Rotella T3 if I can find it, which is pretty much non-existent now, or T4 with a gallon of Rotella Lucas. If you can find a good zinc additive, I would take that over the gallon of Lucas, or maybe use a little bit of both. You can find zinc additives, engine oil additives at some auto parts stores, and when I find it, I usually will buy it, even for my Cummins, because it also is an engine that was designed with flat tappet lifters and cam, and needs zinc also. Now, there are some engine oils that come with a zinc additive still in them, a zinc package still in them. Power driven diesel. I know I've talked about them before in the past for other products. They carry their own house brand motor oil that has high zinc content specifically for Cummins engines. They've got their own contract, I guess, with some oil manufacturer that still puts the zinc in it for them. Now it is a little more expensive, obviously, than any oil you're going to go to Walmart and buy. But if you want your engine to last, that's probably the way to go. It's not like you've got to change the oil every 1,000 miles or something anyway. So as much as we drive these trucks, most of us drive these trucks, put that oil in it, run it for a year, 2, 3 years, whatever, you know, depending on how much you drive the truck and how long you're comfortable with letting oil sit in it. But always 1540. There's really no reason to go any thicker than that, and you certainly don't want to go thinner than that, because you will lose the cushioning protection that you really need with all those heavy rotating components in the bottom end. So let's move on to transmission. The Spicer 3053A. The Army, the Marines, Air Force, everybody that used these trucks in service always ran a 90 weight GL1 gear oil in it, and that is sufficient to protect the transmission and keep it alive for a long time. It's not going to hurt the brass synchros, but it's also not going to give you the best lifespan or the easiest shifting. Now, Spicer specified the same thing that the military specified for the engine. They specified from Spicer non-detergent SAE 30 weight gear oil. And if you do go with 30 or 40 weight gear oil, which if you got a Waterloo Overdrive kit, Tom specified 40 weight gear oil for his transmissions with that overdrive in it. Just give you a little more protection since you're running higher speeds, or you're able to anyway. But the 30 weight oil will give you easier, better shifting and still protect very well. Now, you're going to want to service it, obviously, more often than you would if it had actual gear oil in it. Because 30 weight motor oil is not a hypoid oil that will stand up to a lot of shear load from being pinched between gear teeth at high pressure over a long period of time. That is what you get with gear oil. You get the hypoid additive package that keeps the sorry, I've had a head cold for about 3 days now. I'm sure the smoking doesn't help, but yeah. So gear oil will protect for longer. 30 weight will give you better shifting and still protect, but you need to service the transmission more often. I would, running 30 weight, I would change the transmission oil every other time you change your engine oil. Kind of like doing front brakes and back brakes. You want to change your back brakes every other time you change your front brake pads. It just, I know there's no similarity there except the time period, right? So you're not getting any carbon and things like that in the oil in the transmission, or you shouldn't be, unless something is really, really wrong. So what I run in mine, and this is on my own volition, taking my own risks, I'm running I want to say I put Valvoline 7590 GL5 synthetic gear oil in it, and it's been in there for years now, and it still is working fine. Now, a lot of people say you can't use GL5 because the sulfur in it breaks down from heat and it damages the brass synchros. Well, if you look at the copper strip test that they determine the rate of corrosion on brass from for GL5 oils, it's really the oil I used. Now this is going to vary from other oils, but you can look up the copper strip test results for individual oils if you're looking at buying, say, Royal Purple or something like that. I want to say Royal Purple is one of the few synthetics that's actually yellow metal safe, which means it won't damage brass synchros. But mine, the Valvoline synthetic that I use, it came up on the copper strip test at a really, really low volatility. Like, all it showed was a slight discoloration of the brass. So I figured that's good enough for me. I'm not worried about it actually eating the synchros and then falling apart. And obviously it hasn't. And that's going on 4 years now it's been in there. I don't have to change it often because it's got its actual gear oil. And I went with a synthetic because of the higher speed I'm running, obviously, and the higher torque output from the Cummins. I have this idea, and maybe I'm wrong, but I mean, I'll find out over many more years whether the synthetic oil, the film strength, is actually good enough to protect the internal components of my transmission better with the higher torque, the load applied to everything, than a normal gear oil. So that's why they stand up to heat better, they dissipate heat better, and it doesn't oxidize and break down like regular oils. So there's no question that synthetic oils definitely perform better than conventional in high heat environments and high speed, stuff like that. So it's sound reasoning, but I will find out eventually whether it's right or not. Now, I'm not suggesting that you do that, but I'm saying that it's worked for me so far. And if you don't have a Waterloo kit, if you've got just a regular transmission, if it does fail, you can buy parts or a whole other replacement good takeout transmission really cheap. So it's worth looking into. But let's see, transfer case. Transfer case is kind of almost exactly the same as the transmission. You've got big gears, bearings, heavy rotating mass. Originally was spec'd for 30 weight motor oil. Military used GL1 in them. They do have brass synchros in them. So it's kind of up to you what you want to do there. I am still running a GL5, a regular 90 weight 80/90 gear oil in my truck. Now that is more out of price than anything at the time when I last serviced the whole truck. From memory, I didn't have the money at the time to convert everything to synthetic oils, which is what I intend to do eventually. So you can find, and this is something you'll have to research yourself for your own tastes. Look up the copper strip tests on a few different synthetic oils if you want to run that, and then figure out which price point of which product is best for you, and put your synthetic in the transfer case if that's what you want to do. You will get better fuel mileage and very likely better lifespan out of the components in your transfer case if you run synthetic. Now that's, the synchro is the only thing that's questionable there, and that depends on the oil you use. If you want to stay safe, just go get you a 5-gallon bucket of regular 90 weight GL1 straight 90 weight oil and fill it up and be done with it. Service it every few years. But it's not going to help you at all. It's just going to keep the thing alive. It's not going to make it last longer. It's not going to give you better mileage, anything like that. You can also just run 30 weight in them. That is also acceptable. Or 40 weight, or 50 weight. 50 weight is about the same as 90 weight when you cross the way they measure weights between motor oil and gear oil. I don't know the specifics there, but they don't measure the weights the same. So as far as viscosity, yeah, 50 weight motor oil and 90 weight gear oil are about the same viscosity. Your differentials are easiest of all. They don't have any brass in them, anything like that. They really don't care what you run in them. You can run regular 90 weight GL1. You can run synthetic 75/90, synthetic 75, or what is it, 85 140. Anything you want. I would suggest, if you've got the money, switching over to a synthetic 75/90 in those. There is really no reason to go with the heavier, the 85 140. The differentials are really not a problem that needs extra viscosity protection in these trucks. But if you go over to the 75/90, that's going to protect better at highway speeds, of course, especially when the differentials get hot on your longer trips. And it's going to get up into the places and stay in there high up in the gear train, up in the top loader section, where 90 weight doesn't really circulate well to and stay when it really gets hot. 90 weight, your regular oils, and even your GL5 85/90, when it gets hot, it tends to get repelled by really hot steel, which is obviously not what you want for your bearings, right? So synthetic doesn't tend to act that way. It kind of gets... you guys ever played with the little Lucas Oil gear things on the counter at the auto parts stores? Synthetic is better at climbing and staying up there when it's hot than regular high-point gear oils, GL1 or 5. So my suggestion, once again, in the differentials is a synthetic. It's more expensive. Yes, your differentials take 1.5 gallons or 2. I think 1.5 gallons. Your transfer case like 2.5 gallons. So the only concern that I may have, and I haven't tested this because, once again, I didn't have the money to convert everything to synthetic last time I serviced it, so I'm still running regular 85/90 GL5 in my diffs. Synthetic does get thinner, right? Or I don't know. It thins out, but it still retains its protection. It's like its viscosity rating, even when it's hot. And everybody has heard that synthetic likes to leak more than conventional oils, especially with old seals, right? So that is something you may run into. You may end up with seeping or leaking pinion seals more often, or that you didn't have before. And I have a suspicion, and I can't tell you if it will happen yet because I haven't done it, but I have a suspicion that it may be able to seep past the outer hub seals and into your rear hub bearings and all more easily than regular old 80/90 or 85/90, 80/90. So that's just a thought. I don't know, but I mean, you're more than welcome to try it yourself. All of you guys are going to be able to check this out and try it yourselves long before I'm going to be able to, because I'm back in Korea for who knows how long. So I don't know when I'll be home again. And that's really changing all my, well, it's just synthetic. It's not high on the priority list. I need to buy a property and another shop before I worry about stuff like that. So the only other things really are if you have a winch equipped, obviously the main bull gear in it is brass, and the winch takes gear oil in both sides. Okay, you have a housing on the driver and passenger side. You got to fill them both with oil. I would probably just stick with a regular good old 90 weight GL1 gear oil with that. If it's leaking, everybody just fills them with grease. Corn head grease, the old triple aught or 4-aught grease, double aught grease. I don't know, it's been too long. But yeah, your corn head grease, something like that. I want to say it's double-aught grease. Same thing you can use in the steering box if your steering box is starting to leak. If you've still got manual steering, if you haven't converted to hydraulic power steering yet, your steering box takes gear oil. And believe it or not, it does need to be changed every once in a while because they accumulate moisture, which rusts out your bearings and all kinds of, you know, lovely stuff that you really, really want in your steering box, right? So, drain it, fill it. If it's leaking out the pitman arm shaft, then fill it with grease. I did that to mine years ago, and it's not leaked since. So, but I will be putting power steering on it eventually. I have a kit already. One of actually the last Waterloo power steering kit that was available. So, my flint's about gone. Let's see. If you are curious about antifreeze, now that's not a lubricant, but it is a obviously very important fluid. You know, when you get the truck, it's going to have regular green antifreeze in it, and that's okay. But I like to run coolant with an SCA additive to keep your oh goddamn, I can't think of the word now, but there's a corrosion that happens from the sonic vibrations of the diesel combustion process, and also electrolysis. It keeps that down in your entire system. Really, with any diesel, whether it's wetliner or not, it's best to run an SCA additive coolant. Like you can run the CAT ELC coolant, or what I run in mine is Fleet Charge SCA pre-charged coolant. I get that from Napa, and it comes in, I've seen it in, well, let me rephrase this. When I bought it from Napa, it came in a gray jug, and the pink coloring was very, very noticeable. It's not green. But when I worked in the motor pool on Fort Polk, we got the same stuff, Fleet Charge SCA pre-charged coolant, in a 55-gallon drum, and it was green. So I don't know what is available as far as that goes, where you may be at, but as long as it's a good diesel SCA pre-charged coolant, that's what I would suggest. And another thing I'll note with that is that I have found that the SCA charged coolants tend to help clean the cooling system very well, especially if you've already done a good flush or a couple of flushes and cleaning on your cooling system, but maybe it still has some residue in there that you can see. What I have done, and not only on my vehicles but on some other customers' trucks, is you add that SCA pre-charged coolant in and you drive it around for a while, and you will notice that very quickly that coolant will get rust colored again. You drain it out, and when you do, you will notice that the places that you saw that rust residue before are now very clean. Like if you pull the water pump, which I have, and you see before that it was heavily rust colored stained on the inside of the casting there, you put it all back together, and then you do that, you've already flushed it. And in my case, I've done it when I flushed it and had to fix a water pump leak or replace a water pump, and it had all that residue still, even after using a flush additive and a cleaning additive, and put the coolant in it, drove it around for a while, and developed a leak at the water pump again because I didn't get something quite right apparently, and had to take the pump back off, and guess what? Everything inside is clean, looks like brand new cast iron. It does. I don't know why, but it does a very, very good job of cleaning off leftover residue. So it's not just a longer life thing. It actually does actively clean. So that's about all I can think of right now. Now, your fuel additives, that's a whole other story. We've talked some about that before, but Anyway, I just wanted to go over that with you guys, let you know kind of what's acceptable and what I've done, what I know. So appreciate you guys watching. Have a good one.